Okay, we are live, and I'm hoping you can still hear me. Good evening. My name is Tomás Ávila, and I welcome to the eighth episode of Latinos Leadership 2020. Uh, this program I've been doing for the last 2 months. This is the second month that I'm doing it, and it is to celebrate 20 years of successful Latino leadership. And what do I mean by successful Latino leadership? I mean that back in 2006, researcher Miriam Uriarte published a book, published a chapter in a book titled Latinos in New England. And in that book, her chapter was titled Growing into Power in Rhode Island. And it is this history of Latinos growing into power. And she summarized what we did back then to actually start getting Latinos elected. The book caught my attention, and I have kept it as my Bible of that era and that success. And that's the basis of these conversations, because I'm a strong believer that we have to keep history and we have to tell history. And the reason is because history that is not told is lost. And history that's lost delays progress within communities. Because there's a saying out there that if you don't know your history, you don't know who you really are. So that's part of the reason that I made it a point to document Latinos' history, and needless to say, to stay abreast of our history. So that is the main reason for this. And also, as I was explaining to my guests earlier, it is to make a connection between the baby boomer generation, which I'm a part of it, and the millennial and the generation C and all the others in between, and pass and share that history at the same time to meet new leaders. Because one of the successes that I celebrate with our community is the ability not to perpetuate leadership. I am a strong believer that when you perpetuate leadership, you delay communities and you lack advancement in those communities. So that's why I'm very pleased to have these three young individuals who I consider not only the leaders of today, but the leaders of tomorrow. And I expect them to go higher than anyone out there. And I say that not on a wishful thinking, but as I was explaining to them earlier, I've seen the whole process of growth. I see that growth has allowed me to see the possibilities and the probabilities in our community. So welcome to this version of Latino Leadership 2020. So I want to welcome first Councilwoman Jessica Vega, welcome. Uh, Council candidate Janie Seguí Rodriguez, and Representative candidate Leonela Felix. Welcome all. And now I'm going to ask each one of you, whichever ones, to give an open remark, and then we start the conversation. Who want to go first?
I guess I'll start. Thank you so much for creating this platform for us to come together. It's an honor to be here with two amazing candidates running for office. I'm very excited for both of their election, because we got to manifest it, got to put it out in the universe. And as I was mentioning earlier, it's very unique to be in the moment that we are today, where so many Latinas are running for office. And also in 2018, where so many women were running for office. And it's nice to see that the momentum has continued to go, has continued to flourish. But it's great to be here with everyone watching us from Facebook. Thank you so much for watching us as well. And I look forward to some of the questions that are going to be asked. And I'm sure I'll have some time to tell you a little bit about who I am. I'm a city councilwoman in Central Falls. I probably should have started with that for Ward 5. And it's really exciting to be here with you all.
Hi, everyone. Tomás, thank you so much again for having us here today. This is super exciting. My name is Janie Seguí Rodriguez, and I am running for the Pawtucket City Council in Ward 5, and excited to be here and super excited for this moment that we're in right now, not only in, just Pawtucket. Leonela is also here, who's from Pawtucket, and I'll let her introduce herself, but there's just a lot of dope women of color who are running for office in Pawtucket. So it's a super exciting time for our city, and I'm really excited to be here and to share this platform with you all.
Hey everyone, I just want to echo everything that was said. Tomás, thank you for making the space for us and everybody that's watching. I'm Leonela Felix, I go by Leo, and I use she, her, hers pronoun. I'm a candidate for a state representative in District 61 in Pawtucket, and I'm just super happy to be here with you all.
Thank you all. And Jenny mentioned COVID-19, and needless to say it makes it even more valuable that you are seeking elected office, because we've seen what COVID-19 has highlighted. It hasn't been anything positive per se for our community. And fortunately, it has been able to be mitigated. But to me, it gives more reason and value what the endeavor that each one of you is doing. So with that, why did you decide to seek elected office? Anyone?
Okay, I guess I'll go. Well, I ran for office back in 2018 after just being very discouraged with the 2016 election, the presidential election. And I've always had a passion for politics, but I was always too nervous or felt like nobody looked like me. I didn't have any real role models growing up in politics anyways. There's plenty in Central Falls. But growing up, I didn't see anything. I also didn't think that anything happened in Rhode Island. I was obsessed with the federal level of politics. But I ran for office because I truly believe that you can minimize human suffering by good policies. There are certain things that we just don't have control of. And that's fine. I can't control people's houses getting on fire, unfortunately. However, there are policies set in place and people who are making decisions that affect our lives. Not only our lives, but sometimes it's life or death, right? When we think about health insurance and Medicare for all, when we think about climate change, all these things impact our day-to-day lives. And we may not think so, but politics affects every single thing of our lives. And there's people making those decisions that are not based on our well-being, but based more of the interests of big corporations or their own personal bank accounts. So that's why I ran for office, because I care about my community. And I think that there's things we could do, again, to minimize the suffering and the suffrage that people are going through.
Yeah, I actually ran for office the first time too. 2 years ago, I obviously didn't win. I ran in Pawtucket at large, which is a lot more difficult than to run in a ward. And at the time I was moving between Ward 3 and Ward 5. I was purchasing my house, and you never know if that's gonna fall through last minute or whatever it is. So I didn't really have much of an option other than to run at large if I wanted to run. But in general, I've been in Pawtucket. I moved to Rhode Island in 2012, and I've been here for a long time at this point. And there's just a lack of diversity in Pawtucket that I have seen, not only as my daughter was going through the schools here in Pawtucket, but then at the local government level, just as Jessica said, a lot of us start paying attention at the federal level in terms of politics. But then as you get more into it, you start paying more and more attention at the local level. And there's certainly a lot of policies that could be in place. And I sometimes I get a little envy, when I look at Central Falls or Providence and some of the policies that they put in place or some of the diversity that they have. And I don't see much of that here in Pawtucket. And that's kind of one of the reasons why I decided to run for office, because I think it's so important for us, for the people who are closest to the issues on the ground, to be in decision-making chairs. And I think that everyone should have the option to run for office. And that leaves no one behind. I also want to be an example for my daughters and for everyone else in our community. So those are kind of some of the reasons why I decided to run.
For me, it's similar to Jessica. I've been interested in politics for a while now, but never thought that it was going to happen just because of we know how the economics work, right? If you don't have the money, if you don't come from a certain background, you're just not supposed to be there. So you got to fight a little bit harder. And it's just not something that I thought it was ever for me. It was ever in the cards, but really seeing the inaction in terms of our state legislature. And I've worked with a lot of leaders across the country, and I'm like Janie said, very envious of what they're doing in their state. So not only in Pawtucket, but at large here in the state. And to me, it's like so much more that we can do, again, to, like Jessica said, to minimize human suffering, right? Because it is imperative that we do what's morally right and not just what's right for corporations or for lobbyists and whatnot. We need to work for the people. And I just don't see our state legislature really going in that direction.
Thank you. And very much, I heard a lot of caring for the community. And I say that because it's interesting that usually that's one of the inspirations for individuals to become candidates. And the other that I heard was nobody that looks like me, and which also is another inspiration for individuals to seek elected office. But then I look at all three of you, and I think of the young ladies who sees you as you canvass your neighborhoods, who sees you as make your calls as you walk by, or who are watching you right now, and they can inspire themselves to say, I can be like one of them. And that's the value that I see with each one of you seeking elected office. Jenny, you mentioned that you ran the first time and you didn't win. And I applaud you for running again because, and I say that because one of there's two experiences that I've seen. The individual who runs the first time and decides that, okay, enough. And then I seen the individual who persists. I'll give you an example. My good friend Wilbur Jennings in Providence, he ran 34 years before he actually became elected. And at the same, on the other end, I have friends who ran once and then eventually somebody won their seat. So kudos to you for running again. And kudos to Councillor Vega, because you started, but at the same time you have stayed on, and now this is your third term, and so you becoming second term. I'm sorry.
It feels like my third, though. I'll take that as a compliment.
I know, and I must say this. I think that it's your third term because you from day one you came on running. You got into action. So needless to say, it seems like it's been 3 years, but no, congratulations. And needless to say, Leonela taken the challenge to run and at the same time to make a difference. I in one of the conversations I had, former Mayor Tavera says the following: the only way you can win an election is by running. No other way. So again, kudos to you also for running. So now you decided to run because of all the reasons that you share. And for Councillor Vega is what that has been to be an elected official. And for Jenny and Leonela is what do you expect once you are elected? And I'm optimistic, so I'm looking at three winners. So, Councillor Vega, how has it been being an elected official, and has it fit what you envision?
That is a really great question, and it's one that I expected it to be asked, but it's always like hard. It's been great. It's been challenging. I won't lie. There's been a lot of moments where I'm just like, what did I do? But it's been great. And it's just crazy to me you always want to do the right thing. That's what I'm about. It's about fairness and doing the right thing. But I have been in situations, one in particular, that it's like, what is ethics? What is moral? What is right and wrong? So for example, I broke down, and I'm okay with saying that after the whole Wyatt situation, and they like rescinded some of the votes that were taken, and the inmates were removed and sent somewhere else. I don't even want to get emotional about it, but it's like, it's what we wanted, right? We wanted people to get out of the prisons. We want that prison to go. It doesn't belong in our community. But I couldn't help but think like, oh my God, are we sending these people somewhere worse? At least here we could monitor, we could raise our voices, that people there could understand and know and be aware that we're watching, that we know what's going on. But if they're, let's say, in Arizona or Texas or all these other prisons that there isn't people like Maria Rivera and Jonathan Acosta and our council, who cares, who's out there marching, what's going to happen to these people? So it was like a bittersweet moment where it's just like, did we do what is the right thing? You know? So I had moments like that. And then you have just like, it's rewarding. It's rewarding when you could help people. It's rewarding when you could pass policies like the police and immigration policy to protect undocumented immigrants. Rewarding when you could pass policies to support affordable housing. It's rewarding when, the doors are easily open, when you could create programs for young people. So there's a lot of plus to being an elected official, just being able to really work closely with people who are in office, who want to work with you, who care about you, and who care about the community. I will say we're very lucky in Central Falls. I think we have a great council and a great mayor as well, and a great upcoming mayor as well. But yeah, it has its good, bad, its ugly days, and I think that's with all professions. It's just here is a lot magnified because what you do really holds weight on it has an effect on people. So, but you guys will be okay when you run for office, when you get elected to office. I don't want to scare you.
No. Now they're going to share what they envision as once they get elected.
I'll go. In terms of what I envision, I hope to see more people involved in the community. I hope to see like elected officials that are actually out in the community doing the good work, not for like certain silos of the community, but for everyone. I hope to see like champions for the community. And I feel like that's something that we're lacking here in Pawtucket. And in terms of like policy, I really hope to pass some sort of affordable housing policy. Like we don't even have a homestead exemption in Pawtucket, but even just like passing like, they're not even like radical affordable housing policies, right? Like 10% affordable housing for developers, and like that didn't even go through. So it's like just common sense legislation, especially like considering the fact that like we're in the middle of a pandemic, lots of job loss, right? Like what's the future of our local economy? Also, like there's a lot of development that's coming to Pawtucket. There's the Tidewater planning development, $400 million that's being invested in Pawtucket. And then we also have the new train station. So with all of that development, how are we ensuring that our neighbors who have invested so much in our communities are still going to be able to stay in their homes? So just thinking of like common sense legislation that will help regular everyday Pawtucket citizens and how we can help implement that at the local level.
Thank you. Leonela.
For me, it's very similar in the vein what has been shared already, but I really envision passing progressive policies that will help making sure that we move towards 100% renewable energy and that we're protecting the planet, right? That we can ensure that people have access to healthcare or access to the services that they need rather than incarceration, and that we can decriminalize offenses so that people don't get incarcerated in the first place. I really envision just a very more united state legislature where we can really just pass progressive and just pass good policies. Not even like radical, like Janie said, just like good common sense policies that will affect everyday people. And I know there's things to fear, like Jessica was mentioning, and I've seen it firsthand up at the State House, but there's so much good that we can do, and I'm not dissuaded by what's to come, like definitely ready for it.
Great. And Jessica mentioned the fact that, very much once you decide for run for offices, your decisions have consequences, both pro and against. But needless to say, that goes with the game. And Jenny mentioned, friendly, I forgot the term, but advocates for the community in Pawtucket. And and Leonela mentioned, the fact of progressive. Uh, this pandemic has shown us that everything is possible, that the status quo doesn't any longer holds to what it was. Uh, a lot of if we look at the benefits that the federal government has done very quickly, are I remember them from Bernie Sanders' agenda. So a lot of them. And I say that because, again, uh, the fact of what you are going for and what you're asking is no longer impossible. It's no longer acceptable to be denied just because somebody decided to write a legislation that says, let's withhold progress for one particular group and let's withhold a particular group, under our pressure. So again, I mentioned that because everything that was saying at the same time, your visions and what you are planning to do, to do, and what Councillor Vega had done. I remember I marched at the Wyatt back in March, and it's interesting because until now that you mention it, Wyatt was not in my mind, but you bring some very good points. What happened to those individuals? How is their life? Is it better or is it worse? And, but maybe someday we'll find out. So with all of that in mind, the progress is coming to Pawtucket and Central Falls. Jenny mentioned the train station, the sport complex, you name it. And again, historically, when that happens, it means the way I describe it is that when progress comes to a community, it's not for the community that has lived there for the longest. It's for the community that's coming. And and I seen it. I grew up in Boston, and I saw it there, since I arrived in this country, and then I moved here in Rhode Island, and I still see the same thing. There's some new vision plan out there from the governor regarding equity. I want to talk about equity because when I read the material that the governor has published, it reminded me that Rhode Island has had an equity plan since 2013. I know because I was a participant during that period when all of that was developed. But I'm happy to see that now bits and pieces are being taken. And I say that because also with all the issues that we have had, lack of equity is the one that hurts the most. And it hurts us because they haven't allowed us to build equity. And when I say equity, it's not just about buying a house, because that's what's promoted. Buy a house, but equity means a lot more. To build financial equity, to an economic equity, it takes a lot more than simply buying a house. So in that note, it's like, how do you see everything that's happening around the country regarding the lack of equity, the inequities, and what do you foresee from all of them? And I'm asking from a vantage point of view that I've seen it for 50 years. And don't mean to discourage you, but I'm hoping that this time there will be real changes. So I would like to hear each one of your opinions about equity and the future.
I'll go first since I know that I've been last for the other ones and give a break. So for me, I see what you're saying in terms of what's happening in Boston in terms of equity. We know that, for example, with Marty Walsh and when they brought in all those developments, a lot of the Black community was, especially in Dorchester, like pushed away. The rents were unaffordable. People couldn't no longer literally afford their homes, so had to sell and were displaced from the areas that they live. And seeing that is one of the things that I'm most fearful about, with the train station coming here, right? Because the thing is that yes, more is going to make transportation better and more seamless and all those good stuff. But at the same time, you can't help but think of what is going to happen to our rents, what's going to happen. They're building a lot of development in terms of different apartment complexes and this and that to be able to fill. But I'm just concerned with making sure that the folks that are here are able to stay here and are able to maintain their housing, and that their rents don't go up. We need to make sure that that happens, because we have seen with COVID in particular, like, as you mentioned, we've been able to afford all the good things, all the morally right things that we've been demanding for years, right? We need to make sure that we use this moment to ensure that things continue to go right and that we don't become complacent and go back to where we were prior to the pandemic. Is one of the things I often discuss with my friends is like, let's not go back to the status quo. Oh, we need to go back to normal. Normal was never good. It was never good for all of us. And we need to recognize that, right? We need to move forward. We need to make sure that again, with all the development that is coming to Rhode Island and all the things that we want to do, like particularly Central Falls and Pawtucket, that the folks that are here don't get displaced, because again, we have economic insecurity already. We know that in terms of middle class, we haven't seen economic growth and economic mobility in terms of generational wealth. And even prior, again, to the pandemic, we know that low-income folks didn't even have $500 in their bank account. So they were one health crisis away from being bankrupt. So the pandemic has exacerbated this and it has made it worse. But we know that our governments are able to do the morally correct thing and help our community. So I hope that from this, we learn that our government can work for the people if you have the right people in office. Like, let's just make sure that we elect the right people that will represent us to make sure that these positive things continue on.
Who's next?
I can go. So, I mean, I had a lot of thoughts as like Leonela was speaking, and I mean, in terms of like, for me, honestly, I'm a very optimistic person, and I am fearful of what the next year and a half to 10 years could potentially look like. Like, it could be economic devastation, right? Much worse than the recession in 2008, given what's happening, and it's just exacerbated by the actual pandemic. But thinking of like local communities, and of course, like the new train station, that a lot of people blindly from Boston, like, buy houses here in Pawtucket all the time. And so like just seeing that, or potentially that increasing, I bought a house on my street 2 years ago, and since it's a very small street, and since I've moved here in 2 years, the house next door to I bought a flipped house. The house next door to mine was flipped. The house on the corner was flipped. There's probably 12 houses on the street. So just seeing that already to start, and then like the development of like the mills and like that already raising the rents. The reality is it's like median household income in Rhode Island, I think for Latinos now this year is like 38,000 or something, not much of a move from like 34,000. But we've seen like white wealth in Rhode Island go from like 60 to 80,000, right? But only for Latinos, it's a couple $1,000s, and for Black families, it's like 5,000. Like there's no equity in that, right? So like, how do we ensure that, again, folks are staying in their homes, right? And again, this is not like, poor people deserve to have nice neighborhoods too, right? Like, nice neighborhoods are not only for white families and the suburbs. Everyone deserves to have like to live in thriving communities. So how do we ensure that our communities are thriving and working for everyone who lives in them? Not just some of the folks, right? We're not gonna prefer some neighborhoods over others, or like give more money to certain neighborhoods. But yeah, those are just kind of some of the thoughts that I was thinking of. But most importantly, again, and I'm gonna reiterate it, poor people deserve to live in nice neighborhoods too.
Amen to that.
Yeah, amen to that. Ditto to both of you. For me, equity has never been given to Central Falls. Our schools are not equitable. The income here isn't equitable. The way COVID has hit us isn't equitable. The lack of response from our state hasn't been equitable. I thank the state officials for some of the things that they've done, but there's more that could be done. And the fact that nobody's choosing to do anything is problematic. When it comes to gentrification, that's one of the things that I'm most afraid of. It has its good and its bad, right? I can't deny like street beautification, even though I hate that term, because I agree with Janie 100%. We deserve nice communities as well. And I think the mayor has done a lot on Dexter Street, and now we're getting a renovation done on Broad Street. And we know because of that, Central Falls is in this like perfect little hub where the highway is right there, is a vibrant community even before gentrification might happen. And then you have the suburbs of Lincoln right down the street. It's always funny to me, even growing up, when you go down Lonsdale, which is where I live off Lonsdale Ave, like when it snowed, it was like slippery, slippery, slippery. And then when you get to that Lincoln borderline, it was just like clear roads. And I'm just like, this doesn't make sense. It's a twilight zone. And I think when people think about equity, especially people who aren't people of color, they automatically think that we're trying to take from them. Equity for them means we're trying to take something from them, not understanding this doesn't work like Reaganomics. It doesn't mean that, Reaganomics did not trickle down to people. It did not trickle down to low-income people. It did not trickle down to middle-class people at all. It had the opposite effect. But equity doesn't have that effect. Once you start giving equity to the people who need it the most, that has the positive effect for who are not people of color as well. Because when you set those policies in place, we all benefit from these policies. And I've gotten folks who give me the reputation of I've been called like an anti-white person. I've been shamed for going into other people's cities and speaking up against affordable housing. And I will rightfully take those titles if that's what you think, because that is not what I'm talking about. When I'm talking about people who are oppressed, I'm also talking about poor white people. I'm also talking about middle-class white people who are suffering. I'm talking about those people who sometimes they project their anger on me, even though I'm here fighting for them. So that's what I'm talking about equity. I'm fighting for equity for all, but intentionally for people of color. Why? Because I know when we fix the problems that are going on in our poor neighborhoods, it has the byproduct of also benefiting wealthier neighborhoods as well. So that's how I feel about equity.
Thank you. No, I love your energy and your inspiration.
I get real passionate, and then people start to get scared. It's like, whoa.
There you go. No, but you said something that I like. That equity is not equity is not a privilege. And when the minorities demand equity, it's not trying to take away from the ones who have it. It's just a fair share. And I love the example that you gave of, was it Dexter Street?
Dexter Street, yeah.
Right. Because that's where you see it, and you gave a very good example during the snow time. The same road, but once you pass where we usually live into the next, it's like, wow, what happened here? Totally different road. And that is a perfect example of inequity that doesn't take away from anyone, but it can be done, it can be achieved, it can be accomplished. And again, so I want to talk about equity because there's a misinterpretation of equity. One of the decisions I made many years ago was to stop accepting descriptions just because they've been forced into society and humanity. Because, as they say, it depends who's telling the story, then the significance of what being said is totally different. This conversation, having it with another set of people, it will be different. Probably it will be defensive on the other side, as opposed as to understanding. And again, so I thank you for your openness and, your commitment. Now, so we know what's coming to Pawtucket and Central Falls. And Leonela mentioned something that, the word complacency. That is one of the problems in our poor communities. the crisis comes, causes devastation, and then it's like, oh, well, it was the same thing. So we go back to being complacent and we go back to accepting. How do we break that complacency? How do we become more proactive? Now we have more elected officials in Rhode Island than we ever had. How do we leverage that? How do we leverage individuals like yourself? When reading your biographies, one of the things that I find interesting that very much all of you have a some, well, yeah, human type of education around your degrees, which I find it interesting because, needless to say, it also demonstrates the passion that you have, and at the same time, Councillor Vega in particular. Now I can understand why you are not only passionate, but why you have been very effective in defending the community and at the same time leveraging your elected position to the benefit of the community. So in that sense, how do we take that going forward to whoever gets elected, or whoever decides to advocate? Leave the complacency and become what Councillor Vega has managed to do.
I think that, a lot of times people get elected and they're good people, right? People run for office for good reasons, right? They want to create a positive change within their neighborhoods, their communities. And there's just, I don't know, I've seen it firsthand too. Like, there's just something about like the political sphere where people get sucked into like the status quo, right? Like, I can't do this or I can't do that. I know what the right thing is, right? I think the moral dilemma that Jessica mentioned earlier was a very different moral dilemma. And it's very real, right? Where you're talking about like humans and like what that could potentially do to them and what's the better option. But I think that we really need to, hold elected officials accountable, whether we're the ones who are in there or whoever it is that's in there, is hold them accountable to what they said that they were going to do when they were running, and to hold them accountable to that vision that they had when they were running, to uplift the community and to actually work within and for that community to uplift them. And I think that a lot of times that gets lost once people get elected into office. And that's something that I hope to never lose. And I'm going to make sure I have great people around me, and I want to make sure that that never happens. And I definitely am someone who likes to hold other elected officials accountable, and that needs to be the new status quo, is holding elected officials accountable to the community and no one else.
Who's next?
I can go next. I definitely agree with that. We've seen it in terms of the status quo and the political machine, or whatever good old boys politics, however you want to call it, different names, but it's just do things one way and not really innovative, and you become stuck in that paradigm of doing things the same old way, right? Nothing is going to change. But in order to make sure and hold people, political officials accountable, we need to ensure that people are involved. And I think that a lot of people have become discouraged because, again, politics hasn't worked for them. They haven't seen much progress because of again, going back, it's like a vicious circle. So I think that we need to definitely be able to hold our elected officials accountable to the promises they made to the people. I know, if you are no longer passionate, or you no longer remember what the things that you ran about, go knock on doors and ask people, or go see what people are suffering or are needing. Don't just stand in your pedestal and pass laws or whatever, and without really advocating for the people. And that's what we've seen. And like, just even in Pawtucket, again, we've been to meetings and people are over and over saying the same thing. And they're like, oh yeah, we're going to vote the other way. Again, like, who are you representing? And if you're not out there, who are you representing? Right. And that's always the question that I ask. And I hope to never become complacent. But we definitely need to hold their feet to the fire. But in order to do that, we need to ensure that people are active and engaged in the system, because if not, who's gonna hold them accountable?
Yep.
I agree with both of our candidates. I think it has to do with proximity. I think sometimes you get elected official who stop doing the door knockings. That's why I won my election, because I knocked like 40 times. You get individuals who, they get used to going to the galas and to the state house parties and this and that, and they get comfortable and they want that lifestyle. It's so easy to get caught, wrap up in that. You get a new circle. Like I went to this Dominican event, I think it was last February, and I was just like, wow, I took my mom with me, because again, I keep a very tight circle with the people around me because I want to stay grounded. And I was just like, wow, I've never been invited to like galas or this or that. This is the first. Everything was so new to me. And sometimes I get uncomfortable in those spaces because I'm just like, I'd rather just be home and hanging out. But I think it's that. I think people lose proximity to the issues. They stop listening to their community. They stop going to these events. And you have to go to these events. You want the people in your community to feel like you're accessible to them. Another thing is what you were talking about earlier, Tomás, was just certain folks, and they know who they are, who want to stay in power 10, 20, 30 years. It's time to let things go. Your job as an elected official is to empower your community so they become leaders themselves. That's part of your job. You should be empowered. You should be finding your next protege, with the ones who have the good values and morals. You should be talking to young people and seeing what are their passions and make sure you're going to be that guiding light for them. That's your responsibility as an elected official. And one of the ways that I see this happening for my community is through participatory budgeting. We did that at the high school, and just working with those young people for 3 or 4 months, there's future, like you thank you so much for telling us that, future congresswomen, higher office. I see that within my students. And I know Central Falls High School gets a bad rep because they're not investing in our youth, but those youth are smart. And it's not a lack of effort. But I saw future leaders there who held an actual election and were involved and were committed and voted for the first time and went to City Hall for the first time because we took a field trip there. And now I'm hoping to do this on a citywide level where people could participate in democracy in a tangible way, regardless if you're undocumented or documented, regardless of your age, race, or gender. And this is how you get people involved. You give them power. You give them hope. You give them power, something tangible that they could see, some sort of action. And I think sometimes with elected official, I'm sorry, I'm like rambling, but as an elected official, I think sometimes we start to think of like the long-term vision, which I think is correct, but we also need to give people small wins. We need to be able to do both. So I think that's my responsibility as an elected official, to always stay within proximity to the issues that are happening in my community.
I like that word, proximity. And I like it because you hit it right on the head. That is the key. Because once you lose proximity from those who voted you into whatever elected office, you have lost your agenda when you decided to seek elected office. And we all seen that, definitely that's used. I have told some of my elected friends, I say, what I have figured out that it seems like, and this is any candidate, is that when many of you have decided to run for office, and then you win, I swear that whether it's the state house or the municipal house, they have this indoctrination process where they put you through a process of forgetting everything that you promised and where you come from. And now you respond to a new leader, a new constituency, and it shouldn't be like that. Because, again, I like that word. That proximity should not break from the time you get elected to the time that you're going to remember when re-election comes. Then you remember what you promised. It should be something that, everyone should be held accountable for, and in that regard, and in any regard, because everybody chooses to run for elected office. But just like you choose to run for elected office, you choose who you're going to be represented. One of my peaks have been that, in my case, I always say, no matter where I've been, no matter where I have gotten, I don't forget one thing. It wouldn't have happened if not for the Latino community, and not the Latino community of today. It's the Latino community that has experienced poverty, that has allowed me to advocate for better. So therefore, I will never, ever forget that community, and I will never think that I'm better than that community, because it's a farce. It's a farce. But when you lose that reality, then we get into everything that we have discussed. We're getting close, believe it or not. It's amazing how, when you're having fun, time flies. But anything, I want to hear anything that you want to say in regards to anything. And it's in the essence that I still have questions, but I want to give you the opportunity to express yourself, to your voters or to whoever. So this is your time.
I do want to just say again something that I was thinking of, like, as everyone else answered the questions, and you will hear my 5-year-old in the background, but just like, it's so easy for, when you keep people in perpetual poverty and, lack of opportunities. And I've had families that work 80 hours a week, like just to pay the rent, and that's like a basic necessity, right? We're just talking about like just a roof over your head. But like when we keep people in perpetual poverty, it's so easy to hoard power and to discount them and to like run things as the status quo and keep things business as usual, right? A lot of people don't want to empower the community. They don't want the community to actually be active and make these decisions and to lead their own way, right? They want to keep you so entrenched in your everyday life that you don't even have time to think of what is happening locally and how are, my issues belong to me individually and not actually to everyone around me as well. And America has done a really great job at painting that story that you're not working hard enough, despite the fact that, again, like I said, people are working 80 hours a week just to pay for 2-bedroom apartments. And so again, right, like how do we start to hold elected officials accountable? And it's not even progressive policies, whatever it is, right? Like, again, these are just common sense legislation to support communities so that they can thrive. So just something I wanted to add.
Okay. And as I listen to you, definitely that is, again, perpetuation of poverty is a plan. It's not because it cannot be fixed. It's not because it cannot be changed. As I was listening to you also, it reminded me of something that I experienced when I decided to empower the Latino community, and you mentioned it. And it was that, to me, it was the right thing to do, to empower and improve this community. But as I started doing that, and I started working, and I work with great people, great partners, but I couldn't help but notice that within those circles and outside those circles, it was some resistance. And the way I described it, eventually I told my wife, I said, something, how I feel? I feel that I'm trying to improve this community. And by doing so, I'm stepping on somebody's shoes that is not around me. I'm stepping on somebody's shoes that is not around me and I have never met. And she said, oh, gee, why? And I said, it's because the resistance that I felt. And then I concluded, I said, oh, you know what it is? So by improving my community, I am breaking some perpetuities that others have over this community. So in other words, I'm affecting their pockets, because the poverty that this community has faced for years is profit to many. I had a marketing professor tell me something that I never forgot. She says, don't buy the lie that there is no money in poverty. There is money in poverty. The only thing is that money is not in the community that's living the poverty. It's in the pockets of elected officials, of rich people, and on and on. So thank you, Janie, for expressing that, because again, I speak from my own experience, and that's what and needless to say, and then you pay consequences for that. because your intentions are good for the community, but your actions are affecting somebody else. And that's what causes also, everything. It's not necessarily the developments that come, because the developments are good, but it's the intention that are being smashed by the opportunity that it should come for everyone. Anyone else? Any
I
other
guess
comment?
I'll take a different turn. I agree with everything you both said. But to my people who grew up similar to I did, to the way I did, having parents who worked in factories. I feel like I only saw my parents on the weekends because my mom worked from 3 to 11 at night, so she had enough time to wake us up in the morning, had our dinners cooked. There wasn't no family dinners because my parents were working. So it was me and my sister doing the babysitting. It was me, picking up my brother after school and not being able to do recreational activities after school because, one, we couldn't afford it. So there was no ballet classes or swimming classes. I had to go home and babysit my brother and make sure he ate and make sure we go to bed at a normal time. So to my people who are growing up that way, know that there's nothing wrong with you. Know that I don't want you to internalize that like I did. It took me a really long time to get to the woman I am today. Believe it or not, I was a very, very shy person who knew the answers but kept my mouth shut because I didn't want anybody to hear my voice. And it wasn't until a professor a couple of years ago, I took a sociology class, and I would meet with them one-on-one because I didn't want to speak in class. And he was like, you have a lot to say and you're funny. You should speak up more. And I didn't take his advice right away. It took me still many, many years to feel comfortable to speak up because I didn't think anybody wanted to hear what I had to say. So the young people who look like me, who felt the way I did, know that the situations that you're going through are not normal. Poverty should never be normalized. Your parents shouldn't have to work as hard to get halfway to barely survive. That's not normal. The schools that you're going to aren't normal. The way your streets look aren't normal. And you should remember that and know that this isn't about you. It's not a character flaw. It's not that you're not trying hard enough. It's not that your parents are not trying hard enough. It's that there's people who are making these decisions because they're benefiting from your poverty. They're benefiting from people not giving you the tools and resources so you could uplift yourself. And just know that there are ways to do that. There are people out there, like the women here and Thomas, who are out there and they're fighting for you. They're fighting for your families. And we're not here to assume that we know what's best for you, but we're willing to work together to make sure that you get what you need.
Wow. That, amazing. Absolutely agree with everything you said, Jessica. That's amazing. I have to second that. Absolutely. We have seen that over and over, that we keep people in poverty and it benefits only the few. And we need to break that. We need to make sure that we mentor our youth, that we make sure that we're role models for our youth, and that we just don't become a greed machine who we only want to grow ourselves and not really give back to the community, which is what I've seen happen. A lot of people just become entrenched, like we talked earlier, in that system, not really seeing how you could become a beacon of light for others in your community. So I really hope that anyone hearing this, that they do see that they are people who care about them, and they are people who want their best interests and are fighting for them, and to not give up and don't get dismayed and get involved, and just something's going to change. We're going to make this change. We're going to make it change.
And what I'm going to add to what every one of you say is that you are perfect examples that, you know what, it doesn't matter what they have tried to do against you, against your family, against your ancestors. You are successful individuals. You are succeeding, and you are going to keep succeeding. So again, to me, is the value of this conversation is that others, other young people, are seeing it, and are seeing three successful individuals, despite poverty, despite not having the luxury of the parents being there, and everything that is considered negative. So, and And there's a saying out there that for each minority that succeeds, we have to work twice as hard. And I say 100 times more. So whatever we achieve and what the three of you have achieved is more valuable, is more equitable than anyone out there who was born with a silver spoon in their mouth and whatnot. And I want to conclude with what I said to all of you in private. As I say, I'm celebrating 20 years of successful Latino leadership, successful in politics, successful in obtaining a progress that according to that book, there was no comparison in New England with what we achieved in Rhode Island. And in that notion, I said, what I said earlier, in the three of you, I'm seeing future congresswomen, future governors, future United States senators, future whatever you want to be. But I see a bright future in Rhode Island. I see a bright future in our community. And I see a bright future in the United States of America, because the three women in front of me today are part of what we know. We are becoming a majority in this nation, whether whoever wants it or not. They have delay us, but they're not going to stop us. And again, so the future of Rhode Island, the future of Central Falls, the future of Pawtucket, and the future of the United States of America is bright because of these three bright young ladies that I had the pleasure to have this conversation with today. With that, thank you very much. If you have your last words, please.
Thank you so much, Tomás, for making this space. Thank you to these amazing women, Leo, Janie. Thank you for sharing the space with me. Don't forget to vote in Pawtucket. Don't forget to vote in Central Falls, September 8th. It's primary day. Go out, go vote. November 3rd is general election, and also fill out your census, which is really important. So all my Latinos, make sure you get counted.
I echo don't forget to vote September 8th, right? For a lot of us, if we don't make it after September 8th, we're just not going to be there until again in 2 years. But yeah, don't forget. And also census, super important. Tomás, thank you so much for having us today. Jessica, Leo, it's been great sharing this platform with you all. And again, Tomás, thank you for your leadership in the Latino community here in Rhode Island.
Absolutely. I'm so privileged and honored to be in this space with you all. I loved hearing from you all. Tomás, same as everyone, thank you so much for creating this opportunity for us and being able to elevate our voices and share our opinion in terms of where we've been and where we want to go. Definitely, everyone, vote. Please go out. Also, if you are someone who has immunocompromised or is vulnerable, please apply for your mail ballot application because it's available to you, printed out online on the Secretary of State's website. And just make it a habit, make it a point. Go out and vote. It's your vote. Don't let anybody take it away from you. Thank you.
I conclude with this. September 8th, 2020, Central Falls, vote Jessica Vega. Pawtucket, vote Leonela Felix for state rep and Janie Rodriguez for city council. You all have a good night. Good night, everyone, and thank you again.
You too. Bye.
Bye.
Good night.
Good night.